earlier I was like talked about like promiscuity. Like I'm assuming you guys believe like promiscuity is like bad or shouldn't be encouraged in society. I was wondering what specific factors do you think encourage it most? Do you believe it's like media? Do you think like birth control has anything to do with it? Do you believe like I want to know what your top factors of promiscuity are and what you believe it is.
Yeah, so I would say number one contributor is culture and the education system. So I remember when I was left-leaning, a lot of my ideas came from the school system and just what you're talking about, Planned Parenthood in the classroom. That effort began in the 70s. The majority of high schoolers were graduating with their virginity intact in the 70s before they started teaching health class, which was teaching people that everybody's doing it, and actually they weren't. And within 1 decade, it completely flipped, and the majority of teens were now graduating having lost their virginity. So we ceded a lot of that to the education system, which when parents had more control over their children, what was happening in the classroom was based on arithmetic and not cultural issues, and focusing on engineering children to think that sex is this positive, it's you just do it, everybody's doing it, doesn't matter if you have multiple partners. You combine that with feminism in the classroom. I was forced in college to take a Feminism 101 course, and they kind of made you think that,
Beaten Cheeks donated $200. Candace, please tell these women their past promiscuous matters to be with a decent guy that will not be beta males. SC, that was just a friend, we still on relax. Just answer my text and we good, I promise equals D.
All right, thank you, Cheeks. Was there a question here for Candace, or please tell these women their past promiscuous matter?
Wait, do you mind if I push back a little bit on the education system comment?
Sure.
Okay. Because at least from the things that I've read and that I've studied, it seems like that is true, but in a very particular context. And that very particular context was like basically abstinence-only education, which I don't know about you guys, but makes complete sense to me. Because if you tell teenagers like, don't do this thing is like super, like don't do it. It feels super good, but you're not supposed to do it or whatever. If you phrase it that way, then teenagers are going to go out and do it. Because like at least everything that I've seen recently has been talking about how if you talk about proper sex ed, and people who have more access to contraceptives as well as better sex ed tend to have like a lower body count than people who are like in like lower education, less sex ed, less access to contraception. So I was just wondering like your thoughts on that.
I'm telling you it's not true factually. In the 70s, before they got Planned Parenthood went in the classroom and started funding initiatives, and they started teaching sex education. There used to not be sex education in school, and the way that they got it into the classroom in the 70s was by saying, it's better to teach them, which is what you're saying, because then they'll be more responsible. It actually, within 1 decade, it flipped. The majority of high schoolers were graduating with their virginity before there was sex education, and then when they put sex education in the classroom, the majority of them within 10 years were not graduating with their virginity. So it actually sexualized children.
Yeah. My understanding, but the reason why was because the first manifestations of sex education was abstinence only,
and it was working is what I'm saying to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was working. So abstinence, it used to be considered, and I'm not at all trying to, I'm just telling you what the facts are here. Like when abstinence was the cultural simulation, when everyone said you should be abstinent, you should not have sex before marriage, that idea was permeated throughout culture. It was reflected in culture. There were no sex ads. There weren't people naked on the internet, and people lived their lives. It was considered a big thing, to lose your virginity. You were actually considered someone that maybe a guy wouldn't want to marry because you lost your virginity. That was the cultural understanding, like, in the 50s and the 60s. And then in the 70s, you had this fourth wave of feminism that reared its ugly head and started associating sexual promiscuity to freedom, and things completely flipped. Again, I'm just giving you a historical analysis of what happened in the classroom.
Yeah, I'd
without
be interested.
Commentary.
Hold on.
It's okay if you. Sorry, I'll just finish.
Make it quick if you
can.
can.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like where exactly you're getting that from. If like later you can tell me or whatever.
Thomas Sowell Inside the Education System, and he has all of the sources listed in the back of the book.
Okay, because at least in modern day, do you think that any of that has flipped or no?
No, I think we've become. There was, to use a term, I was actually talking about this yesterday on a podcast. I thought it was pretty brilliant. Paul Joseph Watson, I love his YouTube stuff, and he started talking about hoflation, which is like
that's a thing.
Actually hilarious, which is saying that men used to have to do a lot less and get a very high value woman. He's like, so think about your grandparents and your grandmother. She was a high value woman. She raised the kids. She was conservative. She was beautiful. All of these things, and now we live in this moment where everyone's kind of a hoe, and you have to work harder to get a woman that doesn't have any self-respect or any value. And I just thought it was a really interesting video. It was obviously funny, but he was saying something, and we live in hoflation now, where everybody in their own capacity is selling their bodies. And unfortunately, these are the options that men have. No, I'm not saying it's stunning to me that women talk about what men need to be and what men need to be, but I think just kind of the complete disintegration of when I look at, what my grandmother looked like in pictures. She passed in 2013, and just how classy and how beautiful and how much I wanted to be like her. And now I look at, women today, and I just think, man, I feel bad for guys, like, that the pool is getting smaller, but also it's really positive for women that are conservative and, who it means that you're a part of, maybe a smaller pool of individuals. I see it a lot more in the South, and that men should aspire to pursue those women, absolutely, to raise their families and, to raise their kids.
Do you co-sign on the hoflation
Oh, yeah.
theory?
I believe, yeah.
Oh.
The women today
Okay.
are very low value. And so it's funny because the simulation is like, men ain't shit is kind of the thing everybody's saying. Don't need a man. And it's funny that someone brought up Beyonce because she's living the exact opposite of what she's singing. She's just making money because she knows how to make money in a hoflationary environment.
Okay.
Smart woman. She's like, I'm just going to pretend to be a hoe, but then actually privately I'm going to be like super like.
Hold on. You wanted to come in, then you, please, if you can, try to keep it brief because I need to get to chat.
I was just going to say that my version of my sex education was literally them showing us a birthing photo or a video, sorry.
Yeah, in 4th grade.
That terrified me, and I was like, actually, I don't think I'm going to have sex for a long time. I think I'm good.
Go ahead.
And like, speaking of hoflation, I mean, we're always trending apparently, right? Because
Who's we?
Hoes. Because without us hoes, you wouldn't have like that many views to be watching, right? You have hoes come on the podcast to talk about our.
I'm not knocking hoes.
I don't want to be a hoe.
I'm saying,
I don't want to be a hoe.
I'm saying you have hoes, and when I say you have hoes coming onto the podcast, you know you're a hoe
Do
if
you
you're
mean
a hoe.
literal hoe or like more of the colloquial?
That's Brian's dream.
You know what I mean?
You have hoes, Brian.
So you sit here and you want to bash sex workers, but we come
When
on
did
here.
I
we
bash?
Bash
When did I
anybody.
bash?
Anybody.
I don't think
There was-
anybody
there
has
was
bashed.
very
He's
little
bringing you
bashing.
on here and giving you a platform to speak. So I
Yeah.
think that if he was going to be bashing you, he wouldn't even allow
But
anybody
making
on.
us
The hero
making
of
a
hoes, if
scene.
you will.
Wait, what do you mean making what?
Making us seem like
I'm not making anybody seem any
hoflation,
sort of like.
No, I'm just talking
we're
about a video.
trending.
Oh, I'm-
We're a trending topic, so it's relevant to speak on.
Because it's interesting.
Wait, what?
It's
Yeah.
fascinating. I am
That's what I'm
fascinated by hoes. I'll say it. I'm absolutely fascinated by the way the hoe mind works, the way the hoe hive works. I'm fascinated.
Next
I cover it
documentary.
on my show. You
And
are
it is
correct. It
trending.
is
I'm
trending.
saying, and that's why
when
it's such a
Emma
hot
gets
topic
up
to
and does a
speak about.
video and says something like, it's chic to be divorced before you're 30. It is absolutely fascinating to see how someone's mind can be so warped. In the same way that I think it's fascinating when anybody does anything crazy or says anything crazy, and I cover it on my podcast. I am not knocking it at all. I just tell people what the facts are. You can choose this lifestyle, and here is where you are 99.9% likely to lead in your life, right? You are probably not destined for marriage. You're probably not destined for a stable relationship. Men are going to not want this long term. You can say it 1,000 times. You can have 1,000 cultural examples, and women's still got to go out there and be hoes, because they're about their money and about a Cardi B song or whatever it is. So yes, I think it is fascinating. And it is why I wanted to, talk. This is why I talk about it on my podcast and why I'm very interested to talk to you guys. I hope you guys feel that I've been respectful in listening to, your lifestyles, even though it's so different from mine. And so I appreciate Brian for hosting.
Well, thank you for coming, Candace. Let's see. I have a couple chats here.